a topic today. We're going to talk a lot about decisions. It's one topic. There are 3 mental models I'm going to walk you through, and then there are 3 decision frameworks to walk through as well. These topics are very deep. They're pretty lengthy to talk about, but I'm going to power through as quickly as possible so I can get you over to lunch. But also, I have a worksheet at the end, so there'll be a QR code with a worksheet so you can actually go through in more depth and get a better understanding or handle of some of these pieces we're going to dive into. So I've been coming to the DevOps Boston conference for a really long time. We're talking about the different sweatshirts that have existed through the years. I still remember going to the Nerd Center, which was a cool spot too, and then moving here, which has been awesome. So I've been doing DevOps for a while. Interested in a show of hands, how many of you are currently practicing or implementing or working within DevOps today? All right, how many of you are new? 1, 2, okay, awesome. Well, I'm actually here to tell you that DevOps doesn't exist. It's actually not real. Patrick Dubois, Gene Kim, John Willis, have all created a bed of lies for you to buy into, and all they're trying to do is sell you software from Google, Red Hat. Microsoft's trying to do it through Azure DevOps. So they've co-opted the name. It's this new thing. They're just selling it to you. And actually, if you read the Phoenix Project, anybody read the Phoenix Project? Wow, come on, you guys really have not read the Phoenix Project? I can't see, the house lights are too bright. All right, you guys read the Phoenix Project? Awesome. It's actually a lie. It's just full of fables. And you can't actually use it. The research that Dr. Forsgren did for Accelerate, which came all the DORA metrics, it actually was just really picked and chose. So let me tell you how to really implement DevOps. You actually create 2 silos. You create a dev silo and an ops silo, and then you use Conway's law to your advantage, and that's how it's supposed to work. So question. When I told you DevOps doesn't exist, some people cheered, and I'm telling you about my silos as a better way to implement Conway's law and really get work done efficiently. How did you feel? Did I challenge any of your beliefs? You feel lied to, all right. You feel like I'm trying to challenge your belief. So the whole point of me starting this presentation to dive you into the challenging that DevOps is real is to take you through a concept called the ladder of inference. So the ladder of inference is actually a way that a part of our brain called the amygdala reacts to certain situations, area where is fight mechanism exists, decision making exists, memory formation, and the ladder of inference takes what it is to show up in a way. This is why people will react in a certain way. You see a tiger in the woods. Hopefully you never see a tiger in the woods. You see a tiger in the woods, your initial reaction might be like to run or to fight or to just freeze in place like this and not do anything. That is this ladder of inference is actually our reality into a. I'm going to take you through the ladder of inference real quick. So is this lake of reality. So reality is happening all around you, all at the same time. You can call it, well, it's happening all at once. But you, the individual, will select a reality, whatever that is. Select reality is how you interpret the world, how you then generate your assumptions, which drives your conclusions, enforces your beliefs, and then makes you take an action. This whole ladder of inference happens like that. It's not something that you're like, wow, he just went through that and it took 5 minutes. But the reality of it is, it's like an immediate reaction that's happening in your brain that you should be aware of. Because if you're aware of the ladder of inference, you could actually understand it, understand why you have a certain reaction, understand why when somebody says, hey, DevOps doesn't exist, you might be like, it's really because it doesn't exist. It's just a concept. Right? Those pieces. So every time you go through this ladder, every time you're running up the ladder, you're actually reinforcing your beliefs. That's then interpreting how are you going to next interpret reality, okay? This is a concept I want you to be aware of. This is the first mental model to take you through. All right, let's get to the second mental model. Okay, how many of you have ever seen They Live? Yeah. All right, yes, thank you. Come on, do you want to quote the line at least? Yes. Are you all? Okay, so in They Live, if you haven't seen the movie, guys, it's Halloween time. Watch the movie. It's a great, like, capture from John Carpenter. We're not going to. But in the movie, Roddy Piper from the WWE, I don't know, doesn't matter. He was a wrestler, right? And he shows up, he's acting, and he ends up finding a pair of glasses. He puts these glasses on, and he puts the world around him differently. Okay, so all of a sudden, he's seeing everything that's been hidden in the cloak of darkness around him. And he realizes, wow, everything and seeing, we've been invaded by aliens. But the aliens are trying to make us do more and reinforce capitalism and obey all the things that we're doing, or that you have to consume more, or you have to buy more, and you must conform to our policies and how we act and how we do things and what we're doing. Why am I talking about this at DevOps? Because there's this concept, and Rene Girard. And in his concept of mimetic desire, what's happening at all times when you're making a decision might be related to you wanting something that someone. It might be related to you interpreting how someone else is enjoying their reality and realizing that you want to interpret the same reality. I'm going to challenge that I think the same thing happens with organizations, especially when it comes to select technology. That the reality of it is that we may be interpreting, trying a new thing, or looking at a new technology, or spending a bunch of time on developing something that might just be a desire from a different organization, that you may not get the same results, okay? Predictable past, the past does not predict the future. Just because someone else has success with something, you are going to have success with it as well. So this is my according to generative AI. So we went to a Gartner symposium, and he's like, hey, Jim, I went to the Gartner symposium. So I was thinking that maybe we should have we generative AI. And I was like, all right, what do you want to do? What do you mean? Well, I was at the symposium. Gartner said, the next of everything is Gen AI. And we just sprinkled Gen AI all over our roadmap. And I'll tell you what, the results are not promising. But that's okay. Possibility that big company talks about, he had a ladder of inference where he actually said, hey, all these other people over here, Gartner's telling me that all these people are actually looking at generative AI. But when I look back at my office, nothing's happening there. And then he has a mimetic desire. Oh, if IBM, no offense to IBM, if IBM is telling me that they could use Watson to take all of my legacy code and make it in, I should do it. The problem is being solved. The problem they're trying to solve is mimetic desire to think, hey, if the person's doing it, maybe. Which brings us over to Spider-Man. Spider-Man used to say, everyone's out there DevOps, and I'm just sitting here sysadmining. But everyone's out there Gen-Iing, and I'm in here DevOps. Because Spider-Man is very concerned about what's happening outside of what he's working on and doesn't really work on stuff. But to pivot real quick, because we're going to go into decision-making frameworks next, let's talk about the cloud landscape. I think it's still good. No? It's just the screen flipping. All right, good. All right, so I 7 graduated, 37 are incubating, and 131 are in the sandbox. This is as of October 17th, when numbers, and obviously there's always new projects of that nature. Sorry. Okay, awesome. Sorry about that. Okay. CNCF, gonna go no notes. When you look at this, you can try to navigate this. It's very confusing up front. No offense, CNCF does a great job, though. If you click on an actual section, you can actually and learn the project. Also learn more about how the space. Navigating the space is very interesting, but let's take this space and go into some of our decision-making frameworks that we're going to use. So first decision-making framework I want to take you through is just what I'm going to define as a simple decision-making framework. I'm just going to hold it like this. Yeah, hand mic, beautiful. Yeah, I do. There we go, hand mic. Hey, there we go, okay. A simple decision-making framework, something that is very simple to use, but it has 3 swim lanes. So I divided this framework up into defining the problem, understanding the problem, creating a firewall between your decision, your problem, and your solutions, going through multiple solution exploration, but then also evaluating the options with success criteria, then deciding on the best option from there. So what's important to understand with the simple decision-making framework is that when you're defining the problem and you're understanding the problem, you really need to separate your solution evaluation. Because if you spend time, you go to the same meeting, how many of you have gone to one meeting and been like, here's the problem. We're going to solve it like this. And you're like, well, do we even understand the problem? Is that something we've defined? Have we even written it down? So the simple framework, decision framework, is really meant to be documenting your problem. Spend the time to actually document it. And I love this concept of, oh, okay, all right, thanks. I was like, am I down again? This is not good. All right, so the whole concept is, have you ever heard of a silent meeting? I'm a big fan of this concept. But basically, you don't sit there and just be silent. But you document, you create the documentation, you hand it out before the meeting, you ask people to review it, you come to the meeting, you might spend the first 10 minutes rereading the documentation that you've shared to then work on making sure that the problem has been fully defined. There's been a lot of times that you might show up. I know I personally have shown up to meetings where it's just like, I've defined the problem already, we've defined the solution. What's also key to the simple decision-making framework is to have ownership. Who's going to make the decision? Because a lot of times when you sit there in a round-robin style, you don't understand who the actual owner of a decision is. If you don't understand the owner of a decision and it's gone straight to consensus from a decision perspective, you may not actually make progress to make a full decision. Now, I got the firewall there because I really want you to think about separating decisions. You really need to separate, again, the problem from the solution side. But on the solution side, it's really important to use the rule of 3, okay? And I'm going to call it the rule of 3+. Always have more than 3, at minimum 3, solutions defined to the problem. Because if you only have 2, you now have a binary process for solving to making a decision. And a binary process really doesn't give you the full breadth of what you could figure out to solve for the problem that you're trying to solve for. And then also, when you're developing your solutions or understanding your problem, you really want to define that success criteria. What does this look like for success when that problem has been solved by the solution you defined? Then always decide on the best option. In the bottom section, the bottom swim lane, is the actual execution itself of the option that you've defined. So again, 3 swim lanes, define the problem, separate the problem from the solutions. 3+ rule, always have more than 3 solutions, don't make it binary, and then decide on the best option. And then try to consider using second-level thinking when he's trying to explore more as well. All right. Second decision-making process. This is a slide from a book from O'Reilly, which I linked below, that you can take a look at. But this is called a casual decision diagram. This is a much deeper way to get into to try to make a decision. There are about 10 steps if you wanted to start today on CDD, but there's a lot of literature about this that you can dive into. This is decision intelligence. This is not, to me, this is not like business intelligence. This is not supposed to be like AI focused or predictive analytics or anything of that nature. But this is a way for you to figure out how to document, and this is more of a consensus focused item, where you can build consensus and document what you're going to decide and what the reality of that looks like. So the steps are very simple. Facilitate a brainstorm. Select 3 outcomes to focus on. Have an actions brainstorm. Select 3 actions to focus on. Discuss the chain of events. How do the actions turn to outcomes? Review your diagrams. Add more actions and outcomes for the 3 outcomes as they come along. clean up the diagram, publish it publicly, and then use it for decision conversations. In this example, we're using coffee as an example. So, we have some great coffee roasters. I put my laptop's gone, but I put their logo up. It's pretty cool. But this is a very simple CDD. But the goal is, in the organization, is to create CDDs, create these casual decision diagrams, so you can go and have a predictable decision to drive forward on your outcomes. Because again, if all the decisions that are being made are invisible to the organization, then they don't have the ability to be looked at, to be challenged, to be discussed. So I challenge everyone in the room, think about how would you go about making a simple diagram, such as this, with architects, engineers, whoever you have in the room, to then figure out how you're going to make a decision. Because now it's predictable, and now it's public, and now it's visible. So don't let the decision-making that's happening be invisible to everyone else. Make it visible, so it can be discussed, so it can be reviewed. That's extremely important. So that's the second decision-making framework. The third decision-making framework we're going to dive into is the Kennevan framework. This is a busy slide. The way to say Kennevan is basically like in Home Alone, where the mom's on the plane, Catherine O'Hara, and she's like, Kevin! So think of it like that. It's the Kennevan framework, okay? And this framework was designed by David Snowden. It's really deep, but it's been used across economics, technology, like every domain you could think of from a world perspective. The Kennevan framework has been leveraged and used. It is chaotic on the screen, but it's very simple to understand. There are 5 domains in the Kennevan framework. The first domain is a disorder domain. When you don't have something defined of a problem that you have or a decision you need to make, and it's not broken out into components, everything sits in disorder because you don't know anything about it yet. So you need to understand it. So you start in that big black nexus there of disorder until you can understand the components of the decision you're going to make. Once you understand the components, you can slot it into one of the other 4 domains. The simple domain, which is now called clear, the complicated domain, the chaos domain, and the complex domain. So we're going to dive into each of those pieces of the Kennevan framework and talk about them. Okay, transition's not as cool, but it's fine. The clear domain. So when you're in the clear domain, you can think of it as like you are a mile high above all the other domains, and you're sitting at this top because you're like, I know exactly what's going to happen every single time this occurs. So think of it as like a simple patching process, right? You know you're going to patch X with Y. It's been done 3,000 times. We've written the automation. It's expected. I'm getting an expected result every single time that I do it. It's very pipeline oriented. So you can the 3 steps are to sense the situation, understand it, categorize it into a known bucket of probability or things you could do, and then respond with an existing best practice or solution because you know what the outcome will be. Now we're going to dive into it a little bit further at the end, but you see the little kind of like yellow highlight area? I think it's yellow on the screen. Yeah, it's over there. I'm blocking it. There's a yellow highlighted area over there. So this is the catastrophic fold, which you end up sliding down if you have an outcome you don't expect. Like let's say in this situation, simple math terms, 1 + 1 = 2, but then you did 1 + 1 and it = 3. Well, that would be you're falling into the chaos domain because all of a sudden math doesn't work, which would be really weird, but that's okay. Now let's slide over to the chaos domain. So when you're in the chaos domain, it's action-oriented. This is your incidents. This is your outages. You have an outage happen in your organization. You immediately need to take action. And the 3 steps to this is really you need to act based off your instinct, based off of your team, sense, understand the immediate danger zones, understand the blast radius, understand the impact, and then respond. What's your action to move this to a different domain? Because your goal ultimately is to not live in chaos. How many of you actually live in chaos every day? Yeah, a bunch of you, right? So your goal is to not be there, right? Don't live in chaos. It is not where you want to live. It increases stress, things of that nature. But understanding that when you can exist in chaos and you can take these steps to try to push yourself to another domain. Hopefully you can push yourself to the clear domain, but maybe you can push yourself to the complex domain as well, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
There are other situations where the chaos domain actually works and it's not outage-oriented. It could be like when we talked about earlier, when we were talking about generative AI, and we were like, oh, it's new, and my boss wants me to look at it, and what does it mean? And, well, what am I supposed to do with this? You can be in chaos mode for that as well, because it's new, and you're understanding it. It's a novel practice that you're developing your organization. I know what the answer will be to this question, but how many of you have developed DevOps pipelines for AI ML technology at this point? A bunch of you, a few of you? Good. Yeah, a few of you. Excellent. When you're developing a novel practice like that, you could probably take some things that you know from a different domain, but you would apply them in a chaotic situation because it's new and it's a novel practice that you're developing, okay? Next is the complex domain. So the complex domain is more along the lines of emerging practices and growing, and you're probing, you're gathering knowledge, you're sensing, you're experimenting over and over and over and over and over again. It's this idea that you understand what your problem is, you know that it's complex, and you know you need to iterate to solve for it. So you're probing, you're sensing, and then you're responding. And you might go through this cycle a dozen times before you can push it to the right side. Because ultimately, you don't want to exist in complex and chaos all the time. You want to exist in complicated and clear. But this is for situations where you have interesting problems. You need to continue to dive into it. You may not have all the knowledge that you need to actually solve for it, and you're continuing gaining new knowledge as you're understanding the environment, as you can practice this, to eventually move this into another domain and solve for it or create a path forward. And then the final domain is the complicated domain. So in the complicated domain, you can understand the problem. You understand because you have a roadmap to the problem. You also have an existing blueprint or a plan to that. So this is different than the clear domain, where the clear domain is very very simple items that are very easily deployable, whereas these are complicated, so it means that it might maintain or need multiple teams, multiple items to try to solve and address for. Really, ultimately, what you're trying to get to is a blueprint to solve these problems when I see this problem show up. Versus clear is, I have this simple challenge, it's very easily solved, and I can just keep iterating over and over and over again without having to think about updating or changing or modifying the practice. Okay, so let's talk about that catastrophic fold right in the middle there. So a lot of times in the clear domain, where we push a lot of our best practices, if something that is predictable becomes unpredictable, it slides right into chaos. And you want to make sure that you are monitoring and maintaining and understanding that that fold exists, that catastrophic fold exists, so you can understand what situation is. Because sometimes with a simple domain, we end up complacent. It works. Why do I need to look at it? It doesn't really, it's just running. I don't need to take more work and spend more time looking at these things because it's predictable. It should just be happening over and over and over again. But the reality of it is, if we're not monitoring that domain, if we're not keeping an eye on what's happening there, if we're not progressing and making sure that the actions that are happening in the clear domain aren't predictable and continuously happening, it might force us into the chaos domain because something different has changed. The environment has changed. This could be a security vulnerability that pops up that we were unaware of. This could be related to a specific deployment that's happened a million times, and all of a sudden now it just doesn't work. Maybe a package changed or something of that nature. So that is the kind of a framework, real quick in like a summary format. So let me leave you with the last mental model that I want you to consider. So that was there were the two mental models that we went over, which is ladder of inference. Then there was the mimetic desire. Then we covered the three decision frameworks, the simple one, the decision intelligence, and then we covered the Kennevan framework. But let's leave you with a final concept when it comes to a mental model. So the mental model I want you to think about is memento mori. So the concept of memento mori is that what would you in 10 years, you in 30 years, you in 40 years reflect on with the decision that you just made or are going to make? If you take the time to actually think about what your future self or future others are going to consider about the decision you made today, it might adjust it. It might make some changes into that environment, and it might make some changes about what you're doing. At that same point, timing is also important. If you open the QR code, when I pull it up on the screen, the worksheet, there's actually more detail about when, in the concept of when to make a decision and when the best times are for you based off of your chronotype or based off of your team dynamic or based off of what's happening in the world in general or when you want to start something. And you want to consider those factors, especially when you're going to make a decision in your organization or for yourself. So just 4 quick key takeaways for you is know yourself is probably the first one, I would say, is make sure you are aware of yourself, aware of your actions, aware of the things that how you react to situations. Always define the problem that you're solving, making sure it's the right problem, making sure that it's not a mimetic desire that you are now focused on because you want to, you may not even realize it, but you may be trying to be like another organization or be like another person. And also consider if it's part of your ego. The other item is to choose a decision-making framework. I've laid out 3. There are dozens, right? There's so many decision frameworks out there in the world. These are 3 of my favorite ones, but if you want to talk about decision frameworks, I'm happy to talk more after. There's also the concept that sometimes the best course of action is inaction. So you could make a decision to not do anything, and that's still a decision to make. So it's also another thing to consider when you're looking at decision frameworks. A lot of times they actually don't mention that because they always want you to move forward and always progress forward. But sometimes deciding not to do anything is a decision in itself. So this is the QR code for the worksheet. I've also published the slides. They're in the Google Docs if you want to see the slides themselves or something in there you want to review. But thank you for your time. Sorry about the technical difficulties. My name is Jim Peluso. You can connect with me on LinkedIn if you want to. And thanks for everything. Appreciate it.